Hey, it started.
There you go.
So anyway, we don't have to like go by any kind of thing. I was just going to see if we had any juicy little things I can put together. So,
Yeah.
so how have you felt since we did it? Have you still been kind of excited, or has work kind of taken over?
I have not given it a second thought since we finished. I thought about it that whole week, even at like my part of the process was so heavy up front, and but even after I handed that off to you, and in between talking with you for the rest of the week, I thought about it all the time. Like I
Yeah,
was just like, because it was the first time I'd ever done anything like that, and I part of it was just like constantly second guessing myself in an okay way, not in a like doubting my choices. But I guess it was a little bit doubting my choices, but it was like with reason. Like I was thinking about, okay, this is really cool for a 7-day experiment. What would I do given more time? Like now that I'm done with it, and now that I have some breathing room, what do I think about that and the process? And I thought about it a lot, and then yeah, something about just the magic of that deadline. I was like, all right, cool, and now it's over because there is, I firmly believe that as a writer, and also just with most things that you do, um, you can work on a thing forever, or you can have a deadline that you have set yourself or that someone else has set for you, and that's when the thing ends. I've heard people say that about poems and about novels and about all sorts of projects, like creative projects, especially songwriting. It's not so much that you finish it; it's that you have to move on to the next thing. So
mm-hmm.
you're done. And there was something about like when that Wednesday morning came up, it was like, all right, that's it. Like we've done everything we can do. You had put in, so many hours of work, and we had gone back and forth and done the stuff, and we had looked at it the past couple of days, Monday and Tuesday, and really finalized it. And then you just let it go. You just put it out into the world and let it go. And there's nothing else you can do about it. I spent a little bit of time that morning looking at other people's submissions on Instagram, the clips and the stuff that platform has shared, and it was cool. It was fun to see how different people approach it so differently. The different styles and different. Of course, I haven't seen the finished products, but just seeing it just all felt very different. Like people talking about just like staying up all night and putting in just
People have different ways of working. I guess I gauged it like it was work, so I just
yeah,
got up and did it as work. I mean, I think because there was no projects. There's nothing
right.
like looming over my head right then. It was more of a distraction than anything. Um, but it was really cool. Like to me the experience was fun. I think by the end I was a little tired. I think I got to the point where the steam rolled out, and I didn't really edit. That's why I needed to hand it back to you. It was kind of
Mhm.
like this thing where like, let me churn through these layouts. Let me decide on something, because if it went into a color stage, I know my process so well to know that I would have destroyed it. That's why I not destroyed it, but we would have been half-assed. It would have been half-assed. There would have been something that would have bothered me, and and
Mhm.
and I knew aesthetically I needed to make a choice up front. Like, and I think I realized that really early and mentioned it to you. I don't think I like laid into the idea that we were going to do like a colored thing. That I was
Right.
thinking about inking it a bluish color and kind of playing with that. And I think when those choices were made, I actually think knowing that I had that in my head, working through it and making the decisions, like I looked back at it and I realized that story was pretty. Once everything kind of came together, I think the story pulled together. After we made the few edits at the end, with some balloon shifts and maybe I don't know if we take anything out. We added something I think at the end, but they were minor.
It's just some
Did, yeah.
dialogue stuff. Not really. There weren't any changes that really I think made a huge impact. It really was polishing at that point. Because you're right, we did so much up front.
We figured out we could work together. I don't know why that was even there was never an issue. We've done it before many times 20 years ago. It's just, God, it's a long time ago. And it's not quite that long ago, but you know what I mean? But it was cool because we've been talking about the other thing, and I looked at it as like, if we can do this together, we'll be able to do that other thing together. And because short stories are the hardest things. I was listening to a podcast. I think it happened to be the Platform podcast this week, and they had an author on there, and he was talking about how folks would write like 20-page or 20-issue pieces, and they've never tackled like something small. And I think tackling the small and making sure the beats work and the pacing works and all that works, I think it's a harder exercise than dealing with something much larger, because there's a lot more room to work in that, And I think stuff can get boring quick too when it gets to a larger kind of format as well. You got to have a lot to say. So when you do something small, I think it's like you got so much to say, you have to boil all that stuff down, and you have to constantly edit to make sure the story's still being told. Why compressing it down? We did 6 pages. What was I trying to get you at 5?
Yeah, that's what we're shooting for.
Yeah.
By the end of it, you're starting to get a little burned out, tired, not burned out, but tired. And it made me wonder, like, in your usual process, like with work, do you have multiple projects?
Yeah.
In a day, so that you can context switch, right? You go to something else. And with this, it was just this for multiple days, right?
I think what was going on with this is I was doing like a page and a half a day.
Yeah.
That's a lot. I think, and it was like everything pretty much stayed on model because of the way I designed it. But you've made reference in our earlier conversations how, like, even the anatomy in the little space guy changed, and that was all by design. But some of that stuff's just stylistic choices. I think I burned out because of my schedule, me being excited and really going gung-ho, and I went through like a full weekend after having like a full week of work. I like literally worked through a weekend and Memorial Day. So like there was where I would usually have like a breathing, some moments of breath. I think and it wasn't exhaustion. It was just your eyes get tired, man. You just get tired, like a normal thing for me. If I can animate 4 hours a day, that's a success, because everything else is like planning. So if there's like, what I mean? Like if there's actual production within 3 or 4 hours, that's a successful block of time. And this was happening like, all right, I did a layout, and then like 5 hours later, you get a page. Which is fast, which is pretty fast. But my style's not like overly detailed anyway. We weren't making a Fantastic Four book or anything like that. It wasn't a superhero book, but I think I didn't feel it till the end, man. It just started creeping up. But we were done a day early anyway. And I think I was just pushing to be done, so we can tweak and make things better, and I could rest, and that was kind of the thing there. It's like making a 24-hour movie. I don't know if you've ever done it, or a 48-hour movie.
I have not. I know you have. I've got other friends who have as well.
Yeah.
That seems crazy to me. Like
it is. You just put the goal in front of you and you go for it, man. But at the end of it, you're gonna feel it. I don't want to do that ever again, but it is what it is. Those things kind of happen. But dude, it wasn't big exhaustion. It was just it just caught up. Like, it's just old man shit. It caught up, We went through the draft so fast. Like you literally had, and I want to kind of walk through the idea briefly too. you had an idea, and it was like you called me with the idea, I swear, an hour after you got the prompt. Like, it was so quick. And when you got on the phone and you pitched me the idea, and we both laughed because we knew where our mind would go completely. Like at first, this is probably a good time to talk about it. So we get what? What do we get? Alternate World War II. In the line was like, that guy needs, or they need to be in quarantine or something like that. So you call me an hour later, and you got this like cute ET type story of a kid in this backstory of these balloons, which you can detail about, after I get done with this. But so you have this really neat idea, and it's kind of loose, and you're telling me about it, and I think we both were like, well, I mean, it's that, or it's like mutant zombie creatures, or, it's like zombie, like that's where we see it. And you're going, I don't want you to do horror. And I'm like, that's cool. I don't want to do horror either. I want to do some children's book shit. So this is great. So this idea you had, the one part I think that we kept kind of going back to, well, we didn't go back to it. We talked about it briefly. It was like, okay, the story is this, but the one part that made it an alternate World War II story, you can talk about that, the balloons. That was pretty interesting.
Sure. Yeah. So I live in the Pacific Northwest, and this was a part of our history as a country that I was completely unaware of. Being from Jacksonville, I was more aware of the fact that we had U-boats off the coast during World War II. But it surprised me, I guess. So there's an Air and Space Museum not very far from here. Okay. And they're of course they've actually got the Spruce Goose, Howard Hughes's giant wooden plane is there, and that is amazing. I mean, I would love to do something about that one day. But tucked away in a corner of this building, it's like a huge hangar full of old airplanes and just amazing stuff. But tucked away in a corner, like one small panel, is a photo of one of these balloons that Japan had sent over with these explosives, and the intent was to set the woods on fire. They sent them over from late 1944 through early 45, and they sent them from Japan. So they had this long journey, and the idea was they followed the jet stream, ended up in the Pacific Northwest, and then would land in like winter, in dry winter, and catch the woods on fire and really hurt our resources, right? Turned out it was actually a pretty wet winter, and they just didn't do a whole lot. They ended up drifting, I want to say, as far east as maybe like the Midwest, like Ohio. They found remnants of these balloons pretty far east, but mostly they landed in the woods up here. And I think the most recent one that they found was maybe in Oregon or Northern California in the early 2010s. They found parts of one. I mean, they're just out there, and they're in the woods. They're just pieces of this stuff. But there were these balloons, and I guess part of the allure to me was that I had never heard of this. And it's so incredible to me that during wartime, when most of the history we study involved us in Europe and us in Asia, fighting on those two fronts. But of course we got into it because of Pearl Harbor, but there was more. Like, we were literally attacked. Like, they sent bombs over the United States, and it wasn't effective, but that still to me is amazing. Like, I just think that's so interesting. And as a kid, I would have thought that was amazing. And I didn't know about it until a few years ago. And so part of me just wants to, I hear stories like that, and it's the sort of thing that if I'm at a party, I'm going to probably ruin some conversation by saying, did you know that in 1944,
It's
just
cool, man.
that's how my brain works. And so when I got that prompt, I don't mean to correct you, but actually I called you 10 minutes after I got the prompt.
I know. I was trying
and
to make a little.
we finished talking because I remember getting off the phone with you and looking at my phone, and it was 10 o'clock. Like we had started talking at 9, like right after 9. I was like, is it like how is this happening so fast?
That's
but the truth is, when I saw the prompt, and you're right about the zombie aspect, because it wouldn't necessarily have been zombies, but there are just so many things that when someone says to you alternate World War II history, your brain goes certain places. Most people's brains who are familiar with that genre, they're going to go certain places. And I just thought, I know this story and I kind of want to use it, and I really don't want to tell a story about soldiers. Because and we've gone into this exercise already talking about trying to avoid the obvious path, and so I thought this is definitely not the obvious path, and
it wasn't
through and through workshopping it with you, like talking back and forth about it and really figuring out the plot points, it just became more and more not the obvious path. Now, you could argue that it's kind of an obvious story for a different prompt. Like I think that maybe, if someone had said something like an ET story, I would not have. We would have done something completely.
Oh yeah,
different.
right. We would have probably went horrific with it.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I would never. I wouldn't want to approach that prompt with this story, because it wouldn't have felt like, I don't want to say a challenge, but it just wouldn't have felt like work. Like I'm not sure I would have been able to write this story given that prompt.
No,
but given the prompt,
you had this in the back of your head, and something I never knew about, and when you presented it, I thought it was so interesting. And then I like the kid aspect, because it definitely pointed at things that I do, but not in comic form so much. A lot of the comic stuff is just, I would say, I'm just going to use it. I think a lot of stuff I've been fooling around with maybe for at least the last 2 years, maybe not this year so much, but like a noir type. I know horror is there, but it's not quite horror. It's just dark. Just really dealing with dark spaces and just compositional. I mean, a lot of it's composition, and a lot of it's dark ideas. And when I say that, it's I think one of the last little exercises I did was about time travel. So it's just playing. A lot of stuff is just working through story type things, but using contrast to do it. So when you presented this story is nothing like what I've been doing, even though a lot of my character design type stuff, and then I know you said this to me, it kind of harkens back to when you saw the beginnings of what I was doing with Dress Black with Bill, and we were working on a music video that was dealing with like storyboard book ideas and things like that. And I think we pointed at the Iron Giant, and we do this ET story, but it does, when you wrote it, it was perfect to bring those kind of like sensibilities that I can do and I've done well in the past. Like a spaceship was created through panels, man. Like it literally stuff. I would go back and correct things. The form took shape. I don't know if I've told you the shit. I drew the shape and I'm like, I don't know if I quite like that. But when it started taking different angles, I started figuring out the form of that ship as I went. Then I would go back and fix the layouts. Like it would change over. It was the idea was there. Basically, it's based around that big keg anyway on the back, that big barrel, but the idea stayed there. But I would have to go back and fix form, and then I had to add the little gas tank in, and I had to go back and make sure. I did miss one thing. He had a cuff on his sleeve when he does the steeple at the end. I don't put that on his cuff. I noticed that after. I mean, that's a continuity thing that my poor eyes just didn't get to. But that was an 11 panel page. As simple as some of this stuff was, there was just a lot of little moments happening. I wanted to ask you about that. Is like the spaceman changed probably so much than you originally perceived it, because I remember we had this long conversation about wouldn't say long, but we had a conversation, went back and forth about wearing masks and doing this. And I was thinking like an animator, and I was like, no, it's too short of a story. Like, let's just not do that. But he has to look like a kid, but he's wearing a helmet. And his grandfather just thinks he's some sick. The other kid's grandfather thinks he's some sick little kid, you know.
Yeah.
Named Gus.
And that was kind of the the driver for all of that was the prompt quote. It was just a way to it was working backwards from this idea of the quote was maybe they should self-quarantine.
Yeah.
And even that, I mean, I'm such a I can't really do things the easy way.
Yeah.
And because again, like I look back at that now and I think alternative World War II story, maybe they should self-quarantine. Like of course we're going to do a zombie story. Like it's so easy. Yeah. It's right there. They just gave it to us. And I just didn't want
better than old man goes, that boy ain't right. He needs to self-quarantine.
And that was it. So what I did was I just when I was doing the script, I worked backwards from the line. I said let's find a reason for someone to say that, and it was that. It was the idea of especially because I'm thinking self-quarantining in 2020 is something that everybody's talking about. There's not a person in the world who doesn't instantly know what you mean when you say that. In 1945, it's a little different, and
you're pretty.
And I wanted.
You're kind of quarantined in 1945, though. Regardless, you probably live 8 acres from the next house where we were at in our story too. You know, it was a little
sure.
It was definitely a
sure. And my implication, I don't even know that I really nailed it, but the idea there was just that if the old guy thinks that the little guy is weird, then
it was
his reaction is, yeah, it's a joke. I mean, that's it. It's just a punchline. I use it as a punchline. It's just well, you know, if they're new in town, then they should probably self-quarantine.
Yeah. Because the whole time he was a, just with his little herm and his little moments, he was a
just crotchety old man.
There was a lot of, it was funny. I drew him for what he was, like a box that sat on a chair with a lot of gravity. But I remember I wanted to draw his eyes, as grumpy as he is. I wanted to make sure that he was a friend.
Yeah.
You know, and that was something that I was just kind of exploring just with Marks. But the simple fact, the story was the balloons are the device. And you play on this thing in the beginning, and this is something that I'm very proud of in the story too. You play on this thing where you have this explanation of the balloons in some narration, and then you have I'm assuming this is what FDR, is that who it was?
Yes.
It was
yep.
Okay. So you have this kind of setup of the president speaking, and then it hisses because there's interference and it happens to be the balloons, and that leaves, but that's a setup. And then you find out we're in this whole other thing, this kid playing with toys, and he there's this explosion, right? And this kid goes and explores and sees tears of the balloons in the trees and whatnot. And he comes across this spaceship. But it's not one of these things where it's like, holy shit, you're a space guy. It's like, hey bud, how you doing, friend? It's like very innocent, like what little kids may have done in the 1940s, you know, like there was this very like Mayberry kind of vibe to it, you know. He wasn't afraid of each other. It was like, hey, how you doing? And it's like, I got a broken wrench. Let me go take the broken wrench from your brother. We never really defined all that. We just kind of assumed some of that stuff. And the story is just cute. And it really just becomes about friends helping each other out. And my favorite piece one of my favorite pieces I worked on in it is those little squares. is that mirroring back and forth of what's happening until you get to the end before he touches the bomb.
Right.
You know, I don't know if the execution was as clean as I wanted it, but I enjoyed that piece of visual storytelling. And it's something that I'm influenced by so much anyway, and I wanted to do it. I remember going and looking through the page because I would kind of, this is what I'm saying, I would forget the story. I would know the gist of the story, but I forget the story because I was working page by page. Well, I do layouts to kind of be working page by page. And I remember looking ahead, and Joey says these are 3 panels here. And I'm like, oh, shit, I only got 3 panels to worry about on the next page. And I look at it, and Joey's like, here's panel 1. It's a series of a bunch of shit about this happening, this happening, this happening. And I'm like, oh, this is going to get fun. And then I realized, I was like, this is what I wanted to do anyway. When I played, this is the kind of stuff I want to do anyway with storytelling. So there was a lot of leeway with the way you and I worked. You were smart enough to do some setups, and I'm appreciative of that. Like you're kind of natural to it, but I think it's because you knew the medium. I think you respect the medium, and I think that's why. Like, because even when I write it, it's just bullet points. And a lot of it's in my head. It was easy enough for me to deconstruct sections if I wanted to, but stay pretty close to what you wanted to do. And I enjoyed that because I remember when we were first talking about this, I was like, Joe, I want you to be the writer, and I just want to be the artist. You know, I'm sure when we move to the next things, it's going to be a little different because we're going to have more skin in the game. You know, like it's going to be more about like, hey, we need to make this the best we can make this. So I'm sure there's going to be a little bit more. Sure. Like, what do you think about this idea? What do you think about this? But we didn't really have the luxury. Literally, you were done with this. You were done with the script the night 1. Like, we had 2 talks that day.
Yep.
Like, you sent me. We talked it out. You sent me a draft. I said you forgot about this one part, and that was it. Like, literally, you had it nailed down. Like, because there was one thing, and I think all it was like we were trying to show the balloons, and I think all it was is like, let's just show some balloon, like let's just show some torn balloons in the frame, and that's it. We don't have to show them explode, none of that. And I know there's some liberties in the beginning, and I don't know if they came through or they didn't come through. I guess we'll find out if we're lucky enough to be reviewed. I know you and I see it because we talk about it, but. Sure.
And that's a big part of it. It's really hard to, even now, with a little time in between having finished it and now, it's really hard to know how well it works because I think usually going through, of course we are, and even if you're writing something, you want to share it with like a peer group of trusted friends before you ship it off to a publisher. You want to have a test run of it. Yeah. And that doesn't mean that, it depends on the people you show it to, but the idea isn't always to fix everything. It's to get a feel. Like if people go back and say, yeah, it just didn't work for me. It was fine, but it didn't work for me. That's a read. Like you can do something with that. You can say, okay, maybe that's a personality difference. Maybe they're not familiar with the genre or the medium, like whatever. But still you do that with this. And I think with any kind of contest approach where you are crunch time the whole time, there's really not any room for that. I think you played with that a little bit by like teasing bits of work on Instagram as you went. And so I got to see that. I was like, it is kind of nice to have a bunch of people giving you likes in the middle of working on a thing.
It's like a focus group, man. But oh well, man, I had a good time, and I'm looking forward to working on the other stuff. I just kind of wanted to see your thoughts about it, or hear your thoughts about it.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I'm excited to see how it comes out, and I honestly, I'm pretty excited to see other people's work because I've seen contests like this happen before, and I've National Novel Writing Month is something that I've been aware of since its early days, which at this point was 20 something years ago. It's been around for a long time, but watching people go through that process is always really amazing. But I've never been a participant at this level, and I'm just super curious about other people's processes and other people's results and how they feel about them. Like I love that you're doing this conversation here. I hope that other people have similar things, because I really want to know what it's like for other people to go through what we've just gone through, like what it's like, because you're talking about the way that we knocked out story in day one and then worked on everything else for the rest of the week. Clearly not the way everybody works. So what can we learn from the way they worked? Like, what would they not do next time? What did they do that we would do? Like I guess, to be honest, that's a little bit that's getting into kind of what my day job is. So like people, processes, and interacting, like working at a software company where different teams have to work in their team, like as a pod unit, but also across teams, like, and dependencies. Like if I'm building a thing, I'm not building it alone. It relies on something that someone else is building. And so we learn from each other and we improve by learning how we do stuff constantly, like constantly learning, getting feedback, improving, doing it all over again. And so with this, like the idea that everybody was equally tested, like we were all given the same parameters and we chose different ways to approach it, that to me is fascinating. And I hope that other people talk about that a little bit, because I just think it's so neat.
I mean, I think there's different levels to this too. I mean, I think our backgrounds, not that we're not, I wouldn't say we were pros at this kind of stuff, but I do think our backgrounds and how much we've done creatively, either music, animation, illustration, writing. I mean, there's a lot of time we've spent on these crafts, and I just think we approached it like this is nothing new. I'm proud of it. I can say that. I think it came together, and I'm happy about that. We were able to finally do something that wasn't music or something like that, and that we came together and were able to kind of execute something, and it happened, and it made sense. And I think a lot of people are stuck by that first page. Like people are seeing it and they're wondering what do we do? What is this?
Well, they're not going to guess it from that first page. I can tell you that.
They're not. And
I love that first page so much. I just want to print it out and hang it on my wall.
Well, you should print it out and hang it on your wall. I'll give you the full nice. The thing, and you can print it out. Cool. I mean, I think it's 11 by 17, so it's decent size. Right. But is there anything you want to say to wrap this up? I had a great time doing it, Joey.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. That's it.
Okay. That's it. All right, bud. I'm going to get off this.
All right.
I'm just going to stop recording.